My name is Nancy Akins, and at 52 years old, I thought I understood stability. I thought I understood loyalty. I thought I understood the man I'd spent nearly half my life loving. For 24 years, Ethan and I had what people called a steady marriage. We raised two sons who had already begun building families of their own. Our friends joked that Ethan and I were the couple who would grow old on a porch swing somewhere, still arguing about who made better coffee. But life has a cruel way of waiting until you're comfortable, before it pulls the floor out from under you. My job was swallowing my life whole. I worked as vice president of compliance for a major pharmaceutical manufacturer in New Jersey, one of the largest on the East Coast. The FDA audited us so intensely that sometimes it felt like I lived at the office. For the past 8 months, I was working long hours, weekends, and flying out twice a month to our satellite warehouse. We had discrepancies in the inventory logs, and until the FDA inspector was satisfied, every missing pill felt like a death sentence for my career. I was exhausted. So exhausted I didn't notice my marriage was quietly bleeding out. But I thought it would all be worth it, because I had a plan. I wanted to retire. Not in 10 years, not someday. No, now, by our 25th anniversary next month. I imagined surprising Ethan with the announcement during our celebration. I imagined his relief when I'd finally be home, present, alive again. I imagined us reconnecting in the quiet spaces life had stolen from us. I didn't know yet that he'd already found someone else to fill those quiet spaces. The day it began was ordinary, until it wasn't. One afternoon, I found a small window of personal time between meetings, so I slipped downtown to a little jewelry shop tucked off an alley. A colleague had recommended the jeweler, a Pakistani man with perfect English and a patient, almost fatherly demeanor. I brought him a diamond ring Ethan had given me decades ago, a 1-carat stone with perfect clarity. I wanted it reset into a necklace, something modern but sentimental, for our silver anniversary. He sketched the design, a shimmering arrangement of white gold cradling the diamond like a secret. 2 weeks, he said. It would be ready. I walked out of the shop glowing, imagining Ethan's face when he saw it. But then I saw him. Not across the street, not steps away, but coming out of a hotel lobby. Ethan, looking relaxed, looking like a man who belonged there. He didn't see me, but I saw him. And then I saw her. Lena Morgan, his ex-girlfriend. Married now, to our friend Daniel, with whom Ethan and I had shared dinners, vacations, birthdays. She walked out of the hotel lobby just seconds after Ethan. She didn't look around. She didn't check her surroundings. She simply reached for a cab. Ethan followed her out. He leaned in. He said something that made her laugh. Laugh. A soft, intimate laugh I hadn't heard from her in years. My throat tightened. My first instinct was denial. Maybe they were planning something for the anniversary. Maybe Daniel was involved. Maybe it was work. Maybe. Anything else. Because the truth was too sharp to touch. I ducked back into the alley, heart pounding, waiting for the cab to pull away before I dared to breathe again. That night, he lied without blinking. I came home as usual. Ethan greeted me as usual. He handed me my evening drink as usual. Nothing. Not a flicker of guilt. When I casually asked how his day had been, he said, "Nothing special. I was home all day, just doing a little cleaning." Cleaning. My knuckles tightened around my glass. Not only had he lied easily, comfortably, softly. Lena's name slipped into the conversation when I pretended I needed to ask her husband Daniel something related to work. Ethan's face changed. Barely, but enough. A quick tension in the jaw. A flicker of something like fear. He said he hadn't seen them in about a week. A second lie. My stomach sank. Our intimacy had been fading for months. I hadn't wanted to admit it, but we hadn't made love in 6 months. Every time I reached for him, he pulled away with excuses. Fatigue, headache, stress. Even Sunday, he'd claimed a migraine the moment my hand brushed his shoulder under the sheets. I was beginning to understand why. When I suggested we invite Daniel and Lena over for dinner, Ethan's reaction was instant. Not this week, maybe another time. He looked almost panicked. The puzzle pieces were aligning on their own, forming an image I wasn't ready to see. Suspicion was no longer a shadow, it was a living thing. That night, as Ethan slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling for hours. A metallic, sinking dread filled my chest. I had spent 24 years loving this man, supporting him, raising children with him, growing a life brick by brick. But all it took was a single afternoon outside a hotel lobby to crack the foundation. I couldn't accuse him, not yet, not without proof. What terrified me most wasn't the betrayal. It was the possibility of being wrong about the man I loved. But something in my gut whispered, "You're not wrong, Nancy, you just don't want to see it." I made a decision. The next day, before dawn turned the sky gray, I drove to the office early. I called a friend in the electronics industry, someone I trusted. I told him I needed equipment, stealthy, powerful, discreet. He didn't ask why. By afternoon, everything had been delivered to my office. 10 voice-activated bugs, a long-range receiver, a short-range receiver, a recorder that could capture hours without detection. I held the devices in my hands and felt something inside me tremble. Not guilt, not shame. Resolve. I wasn't going to confront Ethan with guesses. I was going to confront him with truth. That evening, I began planting the microphones. Ethan went out to get groceries. I moved quickly. One in the living room, one in the kitchen, one in our bedroom, one in his car, and one more for Lena's purse. During a visit I knew she would make soon. When I tested the first bug from the basement workshop, the sound came through crisp and clear. My heart was breaking, but my voice was steady. "You're going to show me the truth, Ethan," I whispered to the empty room, "even if I have to drag it out of the silence." And for the first time in months, I felt in control. I didn't know yet that the recordings would eventually destroy not just my marriage, but another marriage, 2 friendships, and almost everything I once trusted. But that is a later chapter. Tonight was only the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan stepping out of that hotel lobby. I heard Lena's laugh echoing between the buildings. I watched them separate like 2 people with something to hide, not something to celebrate. By dawn, exhaustion settled into my bones like a weight I couldn't shake. But clarity had finally arrived. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't paranoid. Something was deeply wrong. And I was done waiting for the truth to introduce itself politely. Thursday morning, I set the trap. I arrived home after work with the tiny bag of electronic devices tucked into my purse. Ethan thought I was working late, buried in FDA audits. He kissed my cheek distractedly before going upstairs for a shower. That was all the time I needed. Room by room, I planted the microphones. Behind a picture frame in the living room, under the kitchen counter, beneath a decorative vase in the library, behind a book on my bedside table, under the passenger seat in Ethan's car, one more in the hallway near the front door. The rest I saved. The hardest one, the one I dreaded, the one I hated myself for even planning, was the microphone for Lena Morgan's purse. But betrayal doesn't care about comfort, and I wasn't going to be blindfolded in my own marriage. The final receiver, a short-range one, sat quietly on a shelf in the basement workshop, disguised beneath my gardening gloves. When I tested the connection, Ethan's footsteps upstairs came through clear as water. My hands trembled only once. I didn't expect proof so quickly. Friday morning, I left for work earlier than usual. Not because I had to, but because I needed space. Space where my emotions couldn't leak through the walls of our home. I didn't check the recordings until that night. Ethan went to bed around 9. I waited until his breathing evened out, a slow, steady rhythm I'd known for decades. Then I slipped downstairs to the workshop and pressed play. The first sound was the phone ringing, loud, sharp, inescapable. Ethan answered. His voice was casual, comfortable, too comfortable. "Hey, are you calling me now?" Silence from the other end, then Ethan again. No, not today, or tomorrow. I told you, not until she leaves town next week." A pause. "Yes, same time, same place." My fingertips went numb. Same time, same place. There are phrases that feel harmless until you hear them whispered in the dark by someone you trust. I replayed it twice just to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting the tone. I wasn't. He hung up, and the house fell silent. My heart broke quietly. No shouting, no slammed doors, no cinematic collapse. Just a cold, creeping ache spreading through my chest until breathing felt optional. I sat in the basement, listening to the hum of the appliances, wondering how many years I'd spent loving a version of Ethan that no longer existed. Wondering when it changed, wondering why I didn't see it sooner. But answers don't matter when the truth already has its claws in your throat. I told myself I needed more evidence, clear evidence that no lawyer could ignore. I needed time, patience, precision. And for 2 whole days, I avoided him. If he noticed the distance, he didn't mention it. My opportunity arrived faster than expected. On Wednesday morning, I told Ethan, "I postponed my work trip. I'll travel next week instead. I'll be home most of today." He smiled, too brightly, and said, "That's great, sweetheart." But I saw it, the flicker in his eyes, the tiny panic. He waited until he thought I'd left for errands. Then he made a phone call. I didn't need to listen live. The recorder captured everything. That evening, when Ethan stepped out to water the lawn, I retrieved the device from his car trunk. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from anticipation. Back in the workshop, I rewound the tape. The first minute was normal. background noise, breathing. Then the call. Ethan, voice low and urgent. She changed her schedule, leaves later, comes back earlier, so we need to meet sooner. A pause, then softer. Yes, I miss you too, but we have to be careful. My eyes shut tight. Careful. He'd never used that word with me. Not like that. The conversation went on, confirming their next meeting. A hotel room, lunchtime, a window of 2 hours. I felt something break, not like shattering, more like a seam tearing after years of strain. I rewound again, though every word carved deeper into me. But I wasn't done. That afternoon I heard them, truly heard them. I wish I could say I braced myself. I wish I could say I was prepared. But when the audio shifted, when the low moans, the fumbling, the squeaking of a bed frame poured out of the recorder, I felt the world tilt beneath me. My marriage, the life I'd built, the person I trusted, was crumbling through a set of cheap speakers in my basement. I listened only because I had to, because lawyers don't work off intuition, because heartbreak doesn't win in court. But God, hearing Ethan whisper her name, hearing Lena laugh breathlessly, felt like being hollowed out from the inside. It wasn't passionate, it wasn't even particularly intimate, just mechanical, repetitive, emotionless. But betrayal doesn't need passion to hurt. It just needs willingness. And Ethan was willing. I copied everything, every recording, every whispered lie. One copy went into my briefcase, the other went into the safe. Evidence, protection, truth. For a moment, I sat in the workshop with my head in my hands, letting grief tremble through me. Tears dropped onto the concrete floor near my feet, darkening the surface like oil stains. But then a strange calm settled over me. Ethan wasn't the man I thought he was, and Lena wasn't the friend she pretended to be. I wasn't losing something perfect. I was losing an illusion. And then, something unexpected happened. 3 days before our anniversary party, the front doorbell rang. I was in the basement listening to that day's recordings when I heard it through the speakers. Ethan answered the door, but he didn't invite the visitor in. It was Lena. Her voice came through, tight and irritated. Ethan, let me in, just for a minute. His reply was panicked. Not here, not in my house. We agreed never. She pushed again. He refused. They argued. Her voice sharpened. His became defensive. Then the door slammed. I rewound it twice. Lena wanted more, Ethan wanted less, but neither wanted to stop. And suddenly, a new clarity formed. I wasn't just dealing with infidelity. I was dealing with a man who couldn't control the consequences of his own choices. That was the final sign I needed. 2 years ago, I would have fought for him. Last year, I would have begged for counseling. 6 months ago, I might have blamed myself. But not anymore. Not after what I'd heard. Not after what he'd become. I contacted a lawyer the next morning. I wanted the papers ready. I wanted everything set. I wanted one final, devastating truth laid bare. The day after our 25th anniversary, Ethan Atkins's life would change forever. He just didn't know it yet. I woke up on the Friday of our anniversary party with a strange, hollow calm in my chest. Not peace, but a quiet before an emotional detonation I knew was coming. The house was spotless. The caterers were scheduled. The decorations were subtle and elegant. Silver tones, soft candlelight, everything Ethan liked. It would be our 25th anniversary, a celebration of love, a marriage that no longer existed. Tonight, Ethan would smile. Tonight, Ethan would hold my hand. Tonight, Ethan would pretend. And tomorrow morning, I would end everything. The gift. An hour before guests were set to arrive, Ethan and I stood in our bedroom, finishing getting ready. He adjusted his tie in the mirror, humming lightly, as if the last 6 months of emotional distance had never happened. I watched him as if he were a stranger. He looked good. Too good. At 47, he still had the boyish charm that had first drawn me in. It stung to know Lena had been enjoying it behind closed doors. But I didn't let the bitterness show. Instead, I lifted the small gold box from the dresser, the custom necklace I'd had made before everything unraveled. The diamond from my old ring glowed under the soft light. Ethan, I said gently, before we go downstairs, I want to give you something. He turned, surprised. Now? Before the party? Yes, I said, now. His smile was warm, too warm. It burned to look at. I held the necklace up behind him and fastened it around his neck. When he looked in the mirror, his breath actually caught. Nancy, this is beautiful. His voice softened. I love it. For a moment, grief slammed into me so hard I almost staggered. Because I still loved him. Because the gesture still touched him. Because somewhere inside me, the woman from 24 years ago still existed, wanting to believe in a version of him that hadn't cheated. But that version was gone. Let's go greet our guests, I whispered. Guests arrive, and so do the masks. The doorbell rang at exactly 7. To my dismay, the first guests were Lena and her husband Daniel. Lena wore a soft blue dress, her hair curled, her makeup flawless. She looked like someone who had already rehearsed this evening 100 times, someone who needed everything to appear normal. Daniel, tall and gentle-natured, smiled warmly as he handed me flowers. Ethan stiffened the moment he saw Lena. Lena's eyes flickered nervously. Daniel noticed nothing. Perfect. Let them feel the walls closing in. Happy anniversary, Lena said with too bright enthusiasm, her voice catching at the edges. I embraced her lightly and whispered so only she could hear. Enjoy the night. It will be one to remember. She froze, completely. Ethan saw her expression and looked at me sharply, but I had already turned away with a polite smile. The party unfolds like theater. More guests arrived. Our sons, Michael and Ben with their wives, our friends Justin and Phyllis. The living room quickly filled with laughter and champagne toasts. It was exactly the kind of night Ethan loved. Everyone except 3 people was enjoying themselves. Lena couldn't stop stealing panicked glances at Ethan. Ethan kept scanning the room, trying and failing to find a private moment with her. I watched them both with detached calm, as though I were studying the final movements of 2 characters in a tragedy they wrote together. At one point, I saw Lena take Ethan's elbow and guide him toward a quiet corner. She spoke rapidly, her eyes wide. He listened, jaw tightening. Then Lena glanced up and saw me watching. Ethan quickly stepped back, guilt flickering across his features. I turned away before either of them could read my expression. The dinner. Dinner was catered beautifully. Roasted vegetables, herbed chicken, crusted salmon. Our table glowed under soft lights as guests settled into their seats. I intentionally arranged the seating so our sons sat on either side of me, their wives beside them. Ethan sat across from me, Lena beside her husband Daniel. A perfect arrangement. Throughout the meal, I watched Ethan watch me. His eyes were searching for something, anger, accusation, pain, but I gave him nothing. That terrified him more than rage ever could have. When dessert began, hazelnut torte with raspberry compote, I tapped my glass for attention. The room quieted instantly. The toast. I stood, I smiled, and I delivered a speech I'd spent days crafting in my mind. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight, I began. 25 years is a long time to love someone, to grow with them, build with them, trust them. My voice remained smooth, steady. Ethan swallowed hard. Our marriage has gone through many seasons, joy, hardship, resilience. Tonight, I want to raise a toast to the journey behind us and the truth ahead of us. Lena flinched. Daniel glanced at her, confused. Ethan went still, frozen mid-breath. I lifted my glass but didn't drink. I simply held it up while everyone else sipped. Only Ethan saw the deliberate gesture. Only he understood its meaning. When I sat back down, his face was pale. Good, let the suspense eat him alive. After dinner, the final invitation. As guests mingled in the living room after dessert, Ethan approached me, voice hushed. Nancy, what's going on with you tonight? I smiled sweetly. You'll know tomorrow. Fear flickered across his face. I walked away before he could speak again. Minutes later, I approached Daniel and Lena, who stood near the fireplace. Daniel, I said warmly, I'd love if you and Lena could come for breakfast tomorrow. Around 8:30, there's something important I'd like to discuss with both of you. Daniel smiled. Of course, we'd love to. Lena stared at me like a trapped animal. Is everything okay? She asked weakly. Perfectly, I said. Tomorrow will bring clarity. Ethan overheard. His shoulders tensed. He knew. He knew the performance was almost over. The end of the night. One by one, guests departed with hugs and laughter, unaware that the evening had been the opening act of a catastrophe. Our sons kissed us goodbye. Daniel and Lena left, Daniel cheerful, Lena trembling. Justin and Phyllis waved their final goodnights. As the door closed behind the last guest, Ethan turned to me. Nancy, please tell me what's happening. But I couldn't. Not yet. The stage wasn't fully set. I'm tired, I said softly. We'll talk tomorrow. Sleep well. Then I walked down the hallway and shut the guest room door behind me. The first time in 25 years I had ever slept somewhere other than beside him. I cried silently into the pillow, mourning a marriage that had already died long before tonight. And as I closed my eyes, one last thought whispered through me. Tomorrow morning, Ethan Akins will face the truth he taught me to fear. Morning arrived, not with sunlight, but with a kind of heavy stillness. The kind that feels like the world is holding its breath. I lay awake in the guest bed long before my alarm, staring at the faint cracks in the ceiling. The house felt unfamiliar. echoing with memories that no longer belonged to me. Today, everything would change. At 8:30 a.m., Lena Morgan and her husband Daniel would walk into this house thinking they were here for a conversation. They had no idea they were stepping into an execution. The kitchen. I waited until I heard Ethan go downstairs before I left the guest room. When I entered the kitchen, he was sitting at the table, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles were white. He didn't look up. Good. Let him feel the weight of the unknown. Let him drown in the fear he created. I passed him silently, poured myself a cup of stale coffee, and sat down across from him with the folded newspaper. Finally, his voice broke the silence. Nancy, are you angry with me? I didn't look up. Why do you ask? You've been acting strange, he said carefully, and you slept in the guest room. That's never happened in our marriage. I'm just worried. Worried. What a convenient emotion, now that the truth was knocking at the door. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Ethan flinched. Perfect timing. The arrival. I moved to the foyer before Ethan could gather himself. When I opened the door, Daniel stood smiling broadly. Nancy, good morning, he said, leaning in for a warm hug. Lena stood beside him, visibly tense, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. Come in, I said warmly. We have a lot to talk about. Daniel stepped inside. Lena hesitated, her eyes flickering nervously toward Ethan, who hovered behind me like a ghost. Is everything okay? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, I said with a practiced smile. Everything is going to be perfectly, brutally clear. She swallowed hard. The living room. Daniel and Lena took the couch. Ethan sank into the armchair across from them. I remained standing for a moment, letting the tension simmer, letting each of them absorb the heaviness in the air. Thank you for coming, I said, returning to my calm, steady voice. I know it's early, but I needed this conversation to happen while everything is still fresh. Fresh? Daniel laughed lightly. Nancy, you're being mysterious. Lena's eyes darted toward Ethan like she expected him to rescue her. He couldn't. Not today. I walked to my briefcase in the corner. Slowly, deliberately, I removed 2 large manila envelopes and set them on the coffee table. Both men looked confused. Both women went pale. The first truth. I've been working long hours, I began. But despite that, I made a very big decision recently. I looked directly at Ethan. I resigned from my job last week. His mouth fell open. What, Nancy, why didn't you? I held up a hand. I'm not finished. I turned to Daniel and Lena. And to celebrate the end of nearly 3 decades in that role, I was planning a surprise trip. Ethan and I were going to fly to Miami, then board a cruise. A fresh start for our 25th anniversary. Daniel smiled. Nancy, that's wonderful. And I thought, I continued, that it might be inconvenient. My voice sharpened. For the meetings Ethan and Lena have been having every Wednesday afternoon at the Harborview Hotel. Dead silence. Daniel blinked. What did you just say? Ethan stood up abruptly, voice shaking. Nancy, don't it. But I'd already pressed play. From the small speaker on the coffee table, Ethan's voice filled the room. She changed her schedule, leaves later, comes back earlier, so we need to meet sooner. Lena's breath hitched sharply. And then the final blow. Yes, I miss you too. Daniel's face drained of all color. His jaw slackened, his hands curled into fists. Lena bowed her head, tears spilling silently. Ethan looked like someone had shot him. I turned the recording off. The silence that followed was deafening. The collapse. Daniel stood slowly, his chest rising and falling with furious breaths. Lena, he whispered, tell me this isn't real. She sobbed, Daniel, Daniel stepped back from her like she was poison. You cheated on me? His voice cracked. With him? Lena tried to reach for him, but he violently recoiled. Don't touch me. She broke into sobs. Ethan moved toward Daniel, hands raised in a pathetic gesture of peace. Daniel, please, let's talk. And then it happened. Daniel's hand whipped across Ethan's face with a force that echoed through the house. The sound cracked like a gunshot. Ethan stumbled back, shocked. Nancy trusted you, Daniel seethed. I trusted you. Both of you disgust me. I stepped forward, picking up the first manila envelope. Daniel, I said softly, this is for you. He hesitated. It contains every phone call and recording between them. If you decide to file for divorce, this will help you. Daniel took the envelope without looking at Lena again. I'm done here, he said, voice raw. He stormed out the door, leaving Lena sobbing behind him. Ethan didn't move. Lena slipped off the couch and collapsed to the floor, crying into her hands. My turn. When the door slammed shut behind Daniel, the room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. I turned to Ethan. He finally spoke, voice hollow. Nancy, how long have you known? Long enough, I said quietly. He sank to the floor beside the armchair, shaking. Please, please let me explain. It wasn't what you think. I was lonely. You were always gone. I cut him off. You knew I was drowning in work. You knew I was trying to secure our future. And instead of coming to me, you crawled back to your ex-girlfriend. He cried, actually cried. Nancy, please, I love you. Love. Such a cheap word in his mouth now. I placed the second envelope on the coffee table. These are divorce papers, I said, already prepared. His head shot up, eyes red and wild. No, Nancy, please, don't do this. We can fix it. We can't, I said softly. You broke something that doesn't heal. He crawled toward me, tears falling freely. Please don't leave me. I'll do anything. Please. I closed my eyes briefly, then looked directly into his. I'm done, Ethan. You don't get to hurt me twice. The final line. I'm leaving today, I said, standing. The trip I planned for us, I'm taking it alone. He stared up at me from the floor, trembling. Nancy. I stepped back. I won't be speaking to you again. My lawyer will handle everything. If you contest the divorce, I'll expose every recording. If you sign quietly, then we can part without more damage. He doubled over, sobbing. I didn't touch him. I didn't comfort him. He had Lena for that. Or rather, he used to. As I turned to leave the room, he whispered, Nancy, please don't stop loving me. I paused, then said the only truth left. You should have thought of that before you loved someone else. And I walked away. I packed slowly. Not because I needed time. My suitcase had been half ready for days. But because I wanted to feel every second of this moment. The end of a marriage isn't loud. It isn't cinematic. It's a series of tiny deaths. Folding his favorite shirt you used to borrow. Zipping the suitcase you once packed for vacations together. Taking one last look at a room where you whispered promises you thought would outlive you. It hurt. God, it hurt. But there are kinds of pain that mean survival, not destruction. This was one of them. Leaving the bedroom. When I stepped out of what had been our master bedroom for 24 years, Ethan was standing in the hallway. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. His face was colorless, his eyes swollen, his posture defeated. Nancy, he whispered, voice trembling. I said nothing. He reached out weakly, fingertips brushing the air near my arm, but not daring to touch me. You don't have to do this, he choked. Please, I'm begging you. Begging. A man who once stood so confidently in every room now couldn't stand without leaning against the wall. I do, I said quietly. And it was the truth. The driveway goodbye. I pulled my suitcase down the stairs. Ethan followed several steps behind, like a shadow that had finally realized it was unwanted. At the doorway, he broke. Nancy, please. His voice cracked mid-sentence. I'll go to therapy. I'll quit my job. I'll do anything you want. Anything. Just don't leave. I'm not leaving, I said. I'm freeing myself. He flinched like I'd struck him. I opened the door and stepped outside into the cool morning light. The driveway was still damp with dew, glistening like tiny shards of glass, a perfect metaphor for the state of my heart. I turned to him one last time. Not as his wife, not as his anchor, but as a woman reclaiming the parts of herself she had forgotten. You didn't lose me today, Ethan, I said. You lost me every time you chose her. He made a sound, something between a sob and a gasp. I walked to the car. He staggered out after me, barefoot, shaking. The collapse. As I put my suitcase in the trunk, I heard it, a broken guttural cry. When I looked back, Ethan had collapsed in the driveway, dropping to his knees as if the earth itself had ripped out from beneath him. He covered his face with his hands. Nancy, please don't go. I can't. But I closed the trunk, walked around to the driver's door, opened it, and with a steadiness I didn't know I still had, I answered. You already went first. His cries echoed behind me as I buckled my seatbelt. I put the car in reverse. For a moment, just one sharp moment, I almost hesitated, because endings hurt, even when they're necessary, because the ghost of the woman I once was still loved the man he used to be. Then I remembered Lena's voice on the recorder. I remembered the hotel lobby. I remembered the lies. And I pressed the gas. As I pulled away, Ethan lurched forward and reached out, as if he could grab the air and stop me. Instead, he stumbled and collapsed again. I didn't slow down. Not this time, not ever again. The letters to my sons. I didn't tell Michael and Ben the truth. Not the whole truth. Children deserve protection from the ugliest parts of their parents. So I left each of them a letter saying Ethan and I had grown apart, that we both needed space, that we still respected each other. But in my briefcase, zipped inside a private compartment, were the other letters. The truth, ready to be sent only if Ethan contested the divorce. He never did. He signed quietly, painfully. Miami. The flight felt surreal. One moment I was a wife of 25 years. The next, I was a woman alone in seat 14A, watching clouds slip by like silent guardians. When I arrived in Miami, the air hit me like warmth I hadn't felt in years. I checked into the hotel meant for our anniversary trip, alone. And for the first time since the betrayal, I let myself breathe deeply. No lies, no secrets, no recordings, no pretending. Just me. I walked on the beach that evening as the sun set in streaks of amber and violet, waves rolling gently at my feet. The wind tugged at my hair like an old friend urging me forward. You survived, it whispered. Now you get to live. Final thoughts. I had loved Ethan more than I ever thought I could love anyone. I gave him decades of my life, 2 children, a home filled with laughter. But love cannot survive when trust is murdered. And betrayal kills in silence. I learned that unconditional love is a myth. No love should survive infidelity. No heart should be asked to. As I looked out at the endless ocean, I felt something strange and unexpected. Peace. Not joy, not hope. Just peace. The quiet sense that I had made the right choice, even though it broke me. And from that peace, new strength began quietly gathering inside me. The second half of my life would look nothing like the first. And this time, I would build it for myself.